Welcome back to the It Starts With You podcast. I am so excited today to have Kristin Gupta with us. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kristin.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Julie. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this conversation. And Kristin is an amazing client of mine who I've had the honor of working with, really getting to know her and help her to bring all of her amazingness out into the world. She is building a community that can really help to change the world, which is why we do what we do, right? She helps develop people and helps them connect with others so that they can really be their best selves. She leads the Defining Leaders group, which we are going to talk more about today. And by day, she is an executive recruiter that specializes in HR. So I know I read your little bio, but I love to hear people in their own words. So Kristin, just share a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
So many people laugh, Julie, when I say my by-day job and then my night job as well. It's not a night job. It's an everything, all-encompassing type of role. But I'm a recruiter. And, the interesting thing about recruiting is people call you when they're at their worst often, when they're looking for a new role or everything feels like it's falling apart for them and now I need to find something new. And I think that one thing that I've seen missing in so many people's careers is that personal and professional development. And often it's how they end up in that position of needing a recruiter's help or not knowing what's next for them within their organization or even outside of it too, which is one of the reasons why we started this group. I think it's so important to work on yourself and your development, but it's also so hard to know where to even start as well. And I think that this group really helps me with that, and I think it helps our people with that too.
I can only imagine, having worked in HR and in recruiting for a little while, I understand like that feeling that people have when it's I want that next opportunity, or I feel stuck, or I feel at my wit's end. And so you're getting that all the time. So what is it? What is defining leaders? So what is it that you help people with? Why do people join?
We help people develop. We give them a community in which to do so and curated information as well. I actually like to explain it as we're the opposite of a webinar. I don't know about you, Julie, but the last time I was a part of or a participant in a webinar, I also made lunch and did the dishes and probably vacuumed and swept the kitchen and took care of the kids and everything else included, because it's a passive way to learn, or it's a passive way to listen. In Defining Leaders, what we've really created is a community that helps each other to learn and grow. We come up with topics as a community in where we want to focus that learning and development as well. So once a month, we have a planning committee that's in charge of ensuring that we're having the right topics for the present community that's there. We usually have about 25 to 30 people per call, and we have a call every single week. I think that's so impactful. We originally started as a job seekers networking group. I saw all of these executives that were looking, and I always knew that the best way to land was to network. But it was so hard for my executives to find the time or who to network with or where to go. And so we created this community, and COVID happened. The pandemic happened, and we ended up having to go virtually really quickly. I'm so glad for that. It's our own silver lining that we really learned how to run a great virtual community where people actually engage in conversations as well. And I just think it's outstanding.
I love how you describe it to like that virtual community, because there's a big difference, and there's a time and place for all those different platforms, right? Sometimes we need to listen to a webinar, sometimes we want to engage, but what you really try and curate, it sounds like in this group, is that sense of community where people are supporting each other. And so it sounds like it's evolved from sort of just like this recruiting space to really a place for people to develop. What types of topics are you typically talking about in these groups?
Right now, I needed this topic, so I brought it up and people got on board with it. But right now we're doing vision painting, which is really about thinking about what your future looks like and putting imagery and putting thought behind it, thinking larger as well in that vision painting. We've got the arts and crafts side of it, the visualization of it in this upcoming week, which I'm really excited for. After that, we're going to be talking about career development. Career development is not a ladder. I think a lot of people think of it as a ladder, like you have to step up the rungs. Julie, both you and I have experienced what it's like to live the opposite of a ladder. It's like a Willy Wonka elevator. And we're going to be talking about that Willy Wonka elevator in the next series, is what does career development really look like today? And what does that mean for you? What types of steps can you take in order to develop your career in all those different directions? And what are you not seeing that somebody else could help you to see as well? So I'm really excited about that series too, because we've got several L&D people coming in, joining in the community on that and doing some one-on-one coaching with people as well. So I think that'll be excellent.
That's amazing. I love how I so relate. Like, we've talked about this, but I love that example you use, because I think especially people who have maybe only worked one place, they've only seen one type of growth, you have this like innate drive that you just feel like you need to keep going up, 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 up. And then sometimes what I find when I'm coaching executives or working with executive teams is sometimes you get to that up, up, up spot and you look around and you go, wait a minute, this isn't where I want to be, because you just had your eyes set on going up versus looking around you and seeing what else could there be, what other places could I use my skill sets in an environment that's going to light me up, not just a title that I feel like I should have.
It's also really interesting to me, Julie, because when I talk to some coaches like yourself, what we also find is some people that would make great executives make terrible managers. And some people that make great managers would make terrible executives. And some outstanding individual contributors would be horrible managers or executives. We can't think of this as linear. We've got to look at all the different directions that people could take, because they're going to be happier. I don't know about you, but I've reported to managers that don't want to manage before, and that's no fun. And I think often we promote people just because they're good at what they do versus because they're actually ready to lead. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. But the center of defining leaders is just that. It's finding out, well, what could I actually do instead of saying they should? We talk about this often in our group too. Whenever you say they should, you become the victim. Whenever you say, oh, the man should, or they should be better at this, or community or the state or the government, or whatever you want to say with the they, you're becoming the victim. You're not taking ownership of what you can do. So in defining leaders, the prevalent thing that runs through our group is we talk about what I or we can do. Sometimes it's an I thing, right? Like, I can stand up and I can do this. I have a game plan now of what I could do next. Often we talk about we, because sometimes it's really hard to do it alone or by yourself, and you needed a community. So we provide that community, the people that you can get with and do it with, because doing it alone is so lonely and difficult, and it's pushing a rock uphill sometimes. So I love that about our group too.
Yeah, and that idea of ownership. I mean, this is just something that I talk to people about all the time, right? You taking ownership of your career, taking ownership of that and not waiting for somebody else. And just like you said, oftentimes people find that they get to these positions and they weren't equipped with the skills to handle all of these things with leadership, because we're oftentimes doing it based upon, you know, are they a good doer? Are they good at that job? And so, and they can feel lonely. You know, I always find that the higher up people get, the less feedback they get, the less encouragement they get, and the lonelier that they can feel. And so being able to have that place. So I'm curious, Kristin, what was what was your driving reason for getting into this development and then wanting to help other people with it?
Oh, that's a really great question, Julie, and I'm excited to tell this story. We tell it every once in a while in Defining Leaders when we have a lot of new people, but in 2020, we started our group because I saw my candidates struggling to see what was next for them or struggling to network, and so I started a group called Milwaukee Executive Networking Group, and we had about 30 people show up in person the week before the pandemic shut everything down. And this group was very much geared towards people that were already at the executive level. Everyone in that room was a director level or above, because that's what I thought I needed in the group. Pretty quickly, once the pandemic started and I saw how many people needed a community, especially when we're all stuck at our homes. And so many people were laid off during the pandemic. So many people needed just a community to be around them, even in a virtual way. And we were able to provide that. It was really interesting in 2021. our community very much changed because 70% of our people landed at the end of 2020 or within the first 2 months of 2021. 70% being around 500 people were landing during that time. So our numbers were changing. We had an average of 100 people a week in Defining Leaders during 2020, and we were starting to see that for a good reason. 12 to 15 people were showing up a week because everybody's landing, everybody's finding new roles, and we're like, hold on, this community is what's important. The job seeker part of this, that's not the important thing. It's about focusing on a topic and getting to know people in a space that's other than their elevator pitch, other than their introduction. In fact, we don't even make introductions on Defining Leaders because we want you to get to know somebody for what they stand for what they believe in. And so we jump right into topics so that we have time to talk about it. And so my board of directors, I put a personal board of directors together, and they said, okay, well, we have something that's great here, and we have a community, but that community was originally focused on this. What I'd like to have is something that's focused on developing myself. And so we started that. We started coming up with topics. We whiteboarded topics like you and I have done, Julie, for our speaking. We just threw everything out there and talked about where we'd like to develop, checked in with our audience and saw if that would be something that they'd be interested in too. And it really just took off from there. I can't tell you how much I've developed during this time, and I'm hoping that we've done something similar for our people too.
And that community and that networking, what would you say? Because I find that this is something that people struggle with when they are looking at what they want that growth to look like in their career and their personal development is who should I network with? How do I do it authentically? So what would be sort of one tip that you have that you've either helped other people with or that people talk about in the community that helps them if they're really trying to grow their network?
So I am an extrovert, and it's interesting because even though I'm an extrovert, if I go to a networking group or an event like IBAW, for example, I went to an IBAW event last year, I walk in the room and everybody's networking with each other and talking to each other. And I even, as an extrovert, have a difficult time going up to a group and saying, hi, I'm Kristin, and being memorable and getting business cards and following up. It's not just an introvert versus extrovert thing. It's really challenging for many of us. And even in the beginning of those sessions, when they have you stand up with a microphone if you're brand new and introduce yourself, who's actually listening to those introductions? Is anyone? So my recommendation is don't feel like you have to own the room. Meet 3 people. And then walk away with 2 coffee meetings, right? 3 because 1 will probably not work out, but walk away with 2 coffee meetings. That's more simple for the majority of us than trying to own the room. And Steve Babowski would say this do you know who Steve Babowski is, Julie?
I don't think so.
He's the leader of the Dale Carnegie in Milwaukee. He's outstanding.
Okay.
He does a great group for Dale Carnegie. But he would say, introduce yourself first to the speaker. Find out who the speaker is at that event and introduce yourself to them because they'll probably refer back to your conversation during their speech. And it makes it much easier on the back end to go and introduce yourself to other people because people actually recognize your face because that speaker talked about you. So that can be big too.
That is thank you for sharing that, like, very specific. That's a great tip for people. And it can be overwhelming. And I always say I'm like an extroverted introvert. Like obviously I'm a speaker. I like to be with groups, but then I also don't want to be with groups all the time. Like if I have an event, then I need to go like retreat to my room by myself for a while. Yeah. And even just like you though, you get into those rooms and I love the energy and I'm excited to meet people, but you see all these people broken up into their little groups. I'm like, well, I'm not just going to go barge in. So I love that tip of just don't put so much pressure on yourself, and you can do it more authentically and more organically and just meet a few key people. And I think that will be really helpful. So if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I really want to grow my community and my network, but I don't know where to get started, when you do go to those events, try this tip and just try and meet 1, 2, 3 new people that you can have a conversation with. So Kristin, you said something before about speaking. So I want to talk about that a little bit because obviously we have been working together to help take your driving mission, your why around helping people to own their growth and own their development, and what you've created with this amazing community of defining leaders, what you do as a recruiter, and bring all those pieces together into this talk that you can get out to more people. So tell us a little bit about your journey and sort of putting this together and what it is that you want to help people to be able to do.
So working with you, Julie, has been outstanding, and versus making it much harder than I needed to. We talked about this as well. The title of my keynote speech that I've been working with you on is Defining Leadership. So it's not that different from Defining Leaders. It really talks about all the things that we do within that group, which is simplifying what leadership means, because most of us overcomplicate it, and allowing you to take ownership of what it means for you as well. I think so many of us let life happen to us and don't see our own personal power within our scope. So I always talk about it being the difference between reaction and interaction. Some people would say reaction and response. I changed that word a little bit to interaction, meaning I'm interacting with what's happening to me and I see where I have power, instead of letting it happen to me and then either woe is me, which happens to some of us, or feeling like the victim within this, right? Like, I don't actually have any power here. It gives you that ability to see where you do have power, and as importantly, where you don't, and where maybe you need to take a sidestep. Some of us stay way too long in a career or a company that we probably shouldn't. And taking ownership sometimes means stepping out and doing something different. I know that Julie and I have both taken some of those steps as well, is to look at what else could I do? Does it have to be within this corporate sphere or corporate structure, or could it be somewhere else entirely?
Mm-hmm. I love that phrase you're talking about. I love the ownership, but that personal power too. Like your power as a leader, whether you are a leader by title, you're a new leader, you're an executive, like anybody who is leading project, leading initiatives, leading people, what is your own leadership and what is your power within that? Because I do think that, when people feel like they are at the effect of things, it's really easy to push everything off on everybody else. And like you said before, it's the organization's fault. It's my team's fault. And if you're unhappy with where you're at, you've got the power to discover more about yourself and to figure out who am I and what is it that I really want.
Mm-hmm. My favorite poem, Julie, is Our Deepest Fear by Marianne Williamson. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is, the thing that holds us back the most is not what's outside of us. It's not actually the circumstances around us. The thing that holds us back the most is our own fear that wants to keep us in our comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Our fear that we could be more than we could ever imagine. But for most of us, that's really scary, that we could do more. So we let ourselves fall into that trap of, I'm stuck, or I can't control my circumstances, so this is where I am. Because that's honestly easier to be there than it is to stand up and say, I am greater than I could ever imagine. Mm-hmm. And I can accomplish so much. And like I said in the beginning, so many things about this, we can't do it alone. Because we will have down days. Oh my gosh, I have so many down days. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when we have those down days, we certainly need our community to be able to help lift us up and see the other side of this equation as well. So I think we talked about networking. How important is it? And networking is not getting 100 friends. Networking could be getting 3 people that are in your corner. That's better, I think, than having 100 people that know your name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having people in your corner. I think a lot of the times leaders feel like they need to do it on their own. They feel like they can't let their guard down. I always say this, like, let's humanize leadership. It's like one of my favorite things, because I think about if we just were to sometimes be more vulnerable and be more human and allow other people to be human and have hard days and struggle, we would create deeper connections with people, and we would realize that you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to be in it alone, that you can have still presence and professionalism, and you can also be vulnerable. And I think holding both, I think sometimes people struggle with that. And like you're talking about, if you have people in your corner, if you have people to talk to and go to on those trusted people, then you can build up that confidence and some of that sort of, awareness that you need.
I actually think that this is another silver lining, Julie, of the pandemic, is we get to see people's human side a little bit more, especially those of us that are remote. My kids walk into half of my meetings. My son talks to most of my clients. He's 6.
Yep.
But we get to see people's other side of the story as well, which if we look at it the right way, I think is a good thing.
So if you could shake people, I think I asked you this. I ask almost all my clients this when we're first trying to nail down, like, what's this message? What's this driving force that, like, why you do what you do that you want to bring out into the world? So I'm going to ask you here, if you could shake people and tell them one thing, Kristin, what would it be?
We talked about this, and I kept staring at this when I was doing something that was very, very difficult for me. It's a quote on the wall of one of my gyms. And it says, for those of you that don't know me, I'm not a gym body. Like, I don't go very often. My husband drags me out of the bed in the morning to go for a walk. Like, lifting weights is the end of my world. So, like, this for me is significant work to even show up at the gym. But at the gym, on the wall, there's a quote that says, think you can, or think you can't. Either way, you're right. This is a quote by Henry Ford. And how true is that? How often do we get in our own way by thinking that we can't? And how often do we drive forward by thinking that we can? So if I could shake people, it would be that. Think you can or think you can't. Either way, you're right.
And I love
tell myself that often at the gym.
That's amazing that's at the gym. And I love that. I remember you talking about that one of the first times that we started talking, that was one of the things that you kept replaying, that you want people to know and to realize, and that is really powerful. And our thoughts are creating all of those things, and if people just thought more highly of themselves and what they were capable of, oh my gosh, what could they do?
Yeah. So speaking of which, if you're interested in joining us for Defining Leaders, vision painting is happening right now. I'm not sure, Julie, if your recording will go out in time for that, but our next one is on career development. We talk about some similar things within that, but we give you that power of seeing what you're capable of within that group. And I think that in itself, along with the community, is the thing that's most powerful.
Yeah, share with us. So you've got the Defining Leaders. How can people connect with you, Kristin?
Great question. So Julie will be posting my website so that you can see upcoming events within Defining Leaders. If you know anybody that's looking for recruitment help on either side of the table in HR, one of the reasons why I started this group is because I really wanted to get to know my candidates at a deeper level than just calling and saying, hey, are you interested in this job? And if not, I won't talk to you for a year. I'm a relationship builder by core. That's who I am. So when I hear your story, I want to be able to help you to get to where you want to be, whether I place you there or not. It's been so interesting, the relationships that I've built, getting to know people, their lives, their families, the shape of what that looks like for them. I love that. So please, through LinkedIn, you can introduce me to people that you know that are looking. And if you want to develop yourself, highly, highly recommend the Defining Leaders group as well.
I love that. Yeah, we will make sure that we drop all of the links in the show notes and for people to connect with you and learn more about it. I know that was one of the things that you and I connected on a lot as well, is just the HR space. Like, I worked in HR. I love working with people in HR. I love those connections. They tend to be relationship builders and connectors. And so it comes through, right, that you have this drive to build relationships with people. And if more people focused on that and tapped into the power of relationship building, like that's how I've gotten opportunities in my career, in my business, in speaking. That's how a lot of people get these opportunities, is by building relationships. And so if anything, you're also kind of emulating that for people. Like, this is how we do it. You build these relationships, genuine, authentic relationships, and that helps you and helps other people to get where they want to be.
Absolutely. Agreed.
So one of the last questions that I like to ask on every episode, and it sometimes relates to the earlier one I asked, but the name of this podcast is It Starts With You. You know, this really came from the fact of a lot of the things that I do, you know, my leadership and high performance coaching, my speaking coaching. The core of all of it that I talk about is it starts with you. What you want to do starts with you. So I always like to ask my guests, what does It Starts With You mean to you, Kristin?
I actually got tingles, Julie, when I saw that your podcast name was that. I think it's pretty obvious in all the things that I've talked about so far is that personal power, the self-ownership of what leadership means for you. But it starts with you. I love the phrase even for myself because there are so many times that something seems insurmountable, whether it be taking care of the family while trying to take care of your career and help the people in your life, and when everything feels like it's falling apart around you, the way to get out of that, the only way to move forward is to start with you. I just think that's so impactful to realize I do have the power, and sometimes we need that reminder when we're going through the mire of it, through the muck of it, as I talk to my candidates about all the time. You know what? The only way to change this is to do something about it for myself. There's no utopia in which everything's going to be perfect, and the journey is the journey, and I'm proud for the journey, and I'm glad for that. But the only way to get out of this muck of it is to do something myself, not to expect everything to change around me.
And every time I just love it. I get goosebumps every time a guest answers this question because first of all, they're always different. Everybody's answer is different, and everyone is so powerful. And like, I literally want to drop a mic when you get done and be like, boom, mic drop moment there. And I just love how that you related that to not even just professional, but personal. Like when we are in the muck of life, I always say, like, when life feels like it's just like slapping you across the face over and over again, what do you do to get out? You take care of you, right? You start with you getting clear and taking care of yourself, and that builds and builds. So thank you so much for sharing that message and reminding people of that. And thank you for being on. You know, I so appreciate all of your insights and everything that you're doing. Obviously, we geek out on leadership stuff all the time and how important it is for people. So thank you. And make sure you check Kristin out. Check out the show notes for all of the links to learn about, again, if you're looking for a role, connecting with her as a recruiter, learning about defining leaders, and learning more about her talk that she is going to get out into the world. So Kristin, thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. This was wonderful.
All right. See you next time.